I've done that. I'm switching over. Sean, you're welcome. I'm so glad you're getting value out of everything. It's been great engaging with you. Okay. So can everyone hear me? Give me thumbs up. Okay. Excellent. I just had that thing happen where I heard myself on a YouTube video once I pushed it and freaked me out. All right. Seth is becoming our host.
Alrighty.
Awesome. If you'll just keep it in speaker view for when you start recording in 2 minutes. Until then, it does not matter. Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you here. Today's curated, branded session is about content strategy, how to develop one for your newsletter, and how to use the summary report, especially in Curated, to test new content topics or what you have and kind of figure out whether you want to keep going in one direction or pivot in another. And newsletter as MVP for great content testing, not just for your newsletter audience, but for your entire audience. We have found that pushing something out through a newsletter, especially something you didn't create, like we were talking with Scott at Up Content earlier, is a wonderful way to see if your audience reacts to it and then determine if that warrants you creating original content around that topic as well. So we got 1 more minute. We're already on YouTube and it is time to get started. Okay, so Seth, if you'll start recording, I'll do my general intro session and then I'll just see what I can fumble in terms of tech. I'm actually pretty proud of ourselves for managing to get through what we've gotten through without too many major hiccups. Yesterday was very comical at the end of the day. So things I cover at the beginning of each session, we are in a Zoom meeting this time instead of a webinar, which means you have access to a chat, but not a Q&A. So you ask your questions in the chat, but if you want to, you can kind of at Seth so he notices those and knows to bring you on to ask them. He can either read them aloud to me or our preference would be to bring you on and let you ask it out loud so that we can have an actual conversation about that. Newsletter Fest has a Slack community. If you have not joined yet, he's going to drop the link for that. The intention of that is to continue the conversation over in Slack and connect you with other newsletter creators and continue to provide resources and conversation beyond the event. We have 2 contests going on. One is to win a free year of Curated. 3 lucky winners will get that. If you are participating in some of these sessions, you may be better equipped than others. We do not have many registrants for that right now. And that's a heck of a prize, especially if you're running multiple newsletters. So I encourage anyone to go in and attempt to win this. We have also a vote for your favorite newsletters. Seth, did that get updated and is running a little more smoothly now? Wonderful.
Yeah, that's all good to go.
Excellent. We're using WooBox for that, for voting. And so we told it to only let people vote once a day, but it needed their emails or something funky was going on. So hopefully we fixed that. And there are several newsletters nominated. Some of them we're going to look at today as we talk about content strategy. So that's my little opening spiel. Thank you all for attending. Now let's hop right into strategizing content. So I have been in content strategy since probably high school as the editor of my high school newspaper. We were a weekly, maybe monthly at times, newspaper called the Tiger Rags. And we literally took WordPerfect and printed out columns that were yay thick and cut them out and then took them to our local newspaper and put them on wax paper in the layout we wanted with pictures on there, and they printed it. So I've been thinking about what's interesting to read for a long time. And I can tell you that in high school, the April Fool's issue was always the most popular. Second most popular was the Valentine's issue, because we ran love notes and we let people put in like, I heard, CJ is in love with FS, and like people just loved paying to buy those. And like, so what you sometimes envision as content that you're really excited about is not always what your audience is excited about. And we spoke with Margot Aaron a little earlier, who I think had some really great things to say about who you are writing for, and knowing that person really well and writing your newsletter as if it is to them. What I would like us to think about today a little bit is about aligning your content with like taking the things you want to write about and that you're passionate about, and figuring out where exactly that ideal customer or audience member, because sometimes you're not writing to sell someone something, but you're writing to get their attention enough so that you can sell a sponsorship for them to continue subscribing without being like offended by the sponsorship. So you get like the exact right fit reader and sponsor, right? So figuring out where your skill set matches up with some audience that you're trying to reach their extreme attention, and then staying on a path that keeps them interested. So you need to think about having it be your brand, whether that's a corporate brand or a personal brand, and your goals. So those are things I would encourage you to take a sheet of paper or a Word document and draft out, like, what is it that is unique about me or my company? And what is it that I want to achieve with my newsletter? We do that with content marketing across every channel. Like, why are we writing this blog? Why are we writing this social post? Why are we writing this newsletter? And sometimes those reasons are a little bit different, but newsletter is a great, wonderful way to test content and see if that's going to resonate with the audience you already have opted in, to determine if it's worth creating more outside and in social or in your blogs, or just more of that content in that vein. So you need to write for your audience, nobody else. And one thing that's interesting to think about is whether you're coming in objective first, like, I work for this company, our goal is this, we want to try to use the newsletter to do that. And if you were working for a client, that would be the thing you're asking them, like, hey, if I'm doing your content strategy for you or your newsletter for you, I need to know your main goals. Because sometimes consumption is the goal of content, not click and buy. Sometimes you use a newsletter that's editorial in style to earn the right to be promotional in separate emails. So you need to kind of be able to define with yourself or whoever you're working for what your objectives are, especially if you're coming in trying to achieve already set objectives. Then the other side of that could be that you are launching a newsletter and you are trying to find your muse. You're trying to figure out what you want to write about for either an audience that you haven't attracted yet, or an audience that you already have, but you're not sure exactly what they want. And so you have to go back to your value prop that you gave them in the beginning and say, how do I stay within the box that I told them I would be in, but really differentiate myself from anyone else who is playing in this space. So I'm going to show you a few examples. They are some of the newsletters that were nominated in the Newsletter Fest 2021 Newsletters of the Year. Okay, everybody seeing my screen?
Yeah, I'm seeing the strategizing content Google Doc.
Oh, that's the wrong screen. I wonder. I knew this would probably happen. I wonder if I move this right here.
Now we're seeing Ann Handley.
Excellent. So I'll just switch things up.
There you go.
I'm Ann Handy. Okay. That was horrible. I know. All right. So Ann Handley of MarketingProfs is nominated in a couple of categories, both for the MarketingProfs newsletter as well as for her personal newsletter, which comes out fortnightly, which I think is just endearing in itself, right? To come out every 2 weeks and call that fortnightly. But she definitely has her brand in here. She typically starts the issue making you feel kind of good about yourself. The subject line is usually, or the preview text is something about like, you're still amazing. Like she kind of gives you a little feel good. I don't know if that increases open rates or not, but I would encourage everyone to test like telling your recipient how you love them somehow in your subject or your preview text to see if that performs well. But her strategy is to start casual with kind of a letter to her reader. And it's usually narrative. She's telling a story, and then she teaches something. She uses some ellipses to create natural visual breaks, but also to kind of move the story forward so that it's scannable. Because a lot of times when we open an email, we go to the section we like, and then we might come back up to the top and read something else. So she makes it really easy to scan and then dive in, which I think I've curated some content about the value of that. So she gets her story out, she gets her lesson out, she gives you a CTA about a talk that she gave at Social Pulse Summit, and some instructions beyond that. So the first part is very like long form, casual, but there's information in here that you enjoy reading. And I will go to one more, but she also has included something super casual, an Instagram, I believe this is Instagram, yeah, post. And then she gets into the things she's going to be sharing this week. And she's using section headers to do that. In Curated, we would usually give that a lozenge or a different title or something, like a section header, which is what we call categories. She has another section called Quickies, which is link text, link text, link text. Very quick, right? For her Quickies section. And she has another that typically repeats called Hot Off the Press, where she's doing something a little more expanded and actually breaking down the key details of the thing that she's sharing. So it's a download that you can get. So she goes into detail. She has rewrite challenge results. She had a little rewrite challenge going on. There were some submissions for that. She has a tools section. Clubhouse, Plagium, Copyscape. And then she ends with her Department of Shenanigans, which is her like kicker, as us journalists would call it, which is basically the fun bit at the end. And then a request for you to share this newsletter. iOS Dev Weekly starts with a much shorter personal intro. This is a little long for him, but includes his picture, which I do that as well. And then a sponsored section, and then different categories that he has selected and built over the years that are color coordinated, so that if one reader is mostly interested in tools, they know exactly where to go when they open that newsletter, because they are accustomed to a tools section. Someone else might be interested in code. Someone might be interested in the entire thing. I'm not saying they're not, but I know that some people open it, here's their jobs, the jobs section, and scroll straight to the bottom, because the bottom is always an inside joke that is click and you get the punchline is on the other side of the click, right? I also brought in Right Society, which keeps their categories simple. It's just the headlines about Frank Lloyd Wright news, and it's mostly where new exhibits are or new interesting bits of information. They do not have any other categories in this newsletter, and they tend to write a little bit more about each link than you might expect, but they know their audience is baby boomers. And they know that that audience wants them to give them the details in the newsletter. And they know that audience over time has taught them that they need to put the link, even though it's here, that they need to at the end of, so their style guide is at the end of every post, they add more from blah, blah, blah here and give a, what is the technical term for that, Seth? An embedded link? Okay.
Yeah, embedded links, right?
Embedded link. So that's the style of this newspaper. Every newsletter, every section or every piece has that link at the end and a longer explanation. They have learned over the years that that is what their audience most responds to. Actually, they do have another section, which is at the bottom, and it's about, and that's for when people find them or have this forwarded to them, and gives just a little about the people and what you can do to sign up. Mine is a curated newsletter with, similar to Ann Handley's, a narrative beginning. Opt-in weeklies objective is to teach people, is to be a resource for newsletter creators, but to also bring people into the curated brand in a gentle way so that they learn about the brand every time they read the newsletter. So we have a curated news section. I have a original content section. And then I have some categories that actually appeal to different personas. So newsletter tips usually appeals to everyone. Curation is actually a category that is not always in each issue, because I don't tend to find quality content about curation. So I only curate it if I thought it was quality content. So it might appear like once a month. But I write this to appeal to individual newsletter creators, marketers, and publishers. So we have like independent publishers, mainstream publishers, marketers. And so what I've done is create different categories for those personas. So if you happen to be a marketer reading this newsletter, you might read my first sections. Screen share seems to be interesting to everyone. People like videos, right? And then you might scan newsletter tips because that's interesting to you. Maybe curation, but you might know, I love what is in here about marketing. Like, you know that that's for you. I, after my marketing section, have a publishing section, which has evolved. It is now a list of links, and I'm not afraid that I'm using a different format here than I am up there. I try to keep this list of links almost narrative if there's like kind of a story in what happened in publishing in the last week. But I have learned that my publishers like want to go straight to the story. They want a little less commentary, and they just want to kind of know, okay, what is the value I can get from some of this news about either journalism, publishing, or monetizing the behind a paywall kind of things. If it gets too much about money, I sometimes bring it into Money Matters, which is also another infrequently recurring section that only happens if there is something worth discussing in that week's news that would appeal to our audience. Then we have our curated news. So I am basically giving a ratio of about 90% editorial content before I even do anything about the brand, because I want to have earned the right to say like, oh, and we do this now. Or the hope is that I'm serving people who are already using the product by giving them some news about the product. We have a roadmap they can click to, but it's also to pique the interest of someone who is not familiar with the product and maybe came in because someone recommended this because they know they're interested in improving their newsletter. And then this is the announcement about the community that we're telling you all to join incessantly. Sorry about that. At the end, I have what is called the opt-in challenge, which is typically something that could have been found in the newsletter tips section, but I have twisted it and made it something that I want people to do in the upcoming week. So some people come right to this because they know it's going to give them like some good advice for what to do that week. I have a few more that I have to drag over. Raisin Bread by Marketer Hire is another one of the nominees. They have a very text-heavy newsletter. Sometimes it starts with a Q&A. Their sections might remind you a little bit of Morning Brew. So they kind of pale out the titles, the section headers, and then they have kind of what looks like you could create in Notion or in Google Docs kind of style with branded color links. So they typically have a front story, like a headline story that you can go, they bring out like the nuggets, like the good things from it in the newsletter, but send you with a CTA to go read more about that. Here's their Q&A. They do a Q&A just about every newsletter, and it's long, but it's interesting. So their audience gives this the time of day because they care about the particular tactic that the person they've done the Q&A with is talking about. Then they get into their sponsored section, but their sponsored section is not a picture of an ad. It's actually editorial style content that promotes whatever brand is sponsoring this issue. And sometimes it's Marketer Hire, and sometimes it's different companies that I don't know if those are under their same portfolio or umbrella, or if they are different companies that are advertising in this. They usually have a tweet of the week, which is kind of an interesting content add-in. And then they have a section that I think is really cool. It's called From Our Slack. And so it's essentially a list of curated links the same way I do publishing, but it's in sentences with just links to the stories in the middle. They will give it an asterisk if it is sponsored. And the interesting thing about this is that they are sharing content that a team of people has collected, but they are also kind of using the From Our Slack to say like, hey, we're smart people and we care about these things, and use that as an interesting way to deliver that content. So you not only go like, oh, I want to go look at this masterful SEO strategy, but you're also like, hey, the team at Marketer Hire is really cool that this is what's going on in their Slack chats. They give you a bite from their blog, and they use a lot of the content in the newsletter and get you to click the CTA if you want more. So it's kind of this concept of they'd rather put it in the newsletter and get the key kernels digested in the newsletter and consumed versus risk the chance of only having put like this sentence and then the link. So what they're doing is showing you what they deem important by how much content they include. And they have a share at the end. So cute little name. Interesting newsletter. All right. The next one I have is from some people I want to recommend you go subscribe to right now. Tiny Little Business is by Andre Chaperon and Sean, I cannot remember his last name. And what I wanted to show you with this one, and I'm sorry, Sean, if you ever listen to this, I apologize for not knowing your last name, is that they keep it very stream of conscious casual, like they are writing to a friend, and long form. And I typically read the whole thing because it's typically interesting to me. This aligns with what Margot Aaron was telling us earlier about the fact that length is not the problem. Being boring or not relevant to your audience is a problem. So when you are relevant to your audience, you can use the amount of text you need to explain your point in a format that they enjoy. So the people who read this are readers, and they want to attract readers. So they are not afraid to go long form, and they are not afraid to make you think and spend time in the email. So you have to think about what your reader wants and determine whether going long form and telling a story, and like, because he's giving us a narrative of something that he experienced. It's almost like a personal case study, and then delivering. So, and it's usually going to tell us about something he's trying to sell us that is aligned with the story, right? So this one is a course that they're selling. You get a lesson even if you don't sign up for the course, but this is a newsletter that I think comes out, it feels like every 2 weeks, but I'm not 100% sure. And then the last one I'll bring over is the Click, who is asking people to go vote for their newsletter. So that's awesome. Yay, Seth. He created the graphic. So they typically have a today section at the top that opens a loop and tells people, it's almost like the preview text, but within the email itself, they write it last. But this tells you what you're going to get in this newsletter. So it's opening story loops, like a small little digest. So we know that these things are coming and that we will need to scroll to understand why Bombay Sapphire is mentioned in this email. Sometimes they'll put their sponsorship right under that. And then they have different segments. So they have Click This, which is a section of curated links where they give you enough. Oh, this one's just one link, and they're bringing out the points from that article. But here's the link. So they're trying to deliver you what you need to know that's vital here, but you can go and dive deeper here with the link. Quick links is the section I was mistakenly assuming I was in. Quick links, link, content, link, content, link, content. So this is where they try to give you a short summary of what this link would take you to. Or is kind of fun, right? It kind of reminds you of being on a game show or something. And it's almost gamifying their newsletter because they're telling you the answer to this or question is going to be at the bottom. And it's usually something interesting that their particular audience would find intriguing enough to scroll to the bottom of the email to see. Oh, and this is their humor kicker. Sometimes it's short, sometimes it's long. Typically it involves a GIF or a GIF, whatever side of the GIF conversation you land on. And then they hit you with their or answer, which is extended so that you don't just get the straight answer, you get like the story behind that answer. So that has given you kind of a glimpse of several different content strategies. All of them are pinpointing their reader, and determining what vehicle, what sections of content and topics they should deliver, and how they can do that in different ways to keep that reader engaged and entertained. So the first thing you need to do is decide on the topics that you want to cover. And in Curated, I'm hearing one of my daughter's iPads ringing, and I was like, who has a phone in this house? Okay, back to topic. So you want to decide on which topics. And so basically, what is your newsletter about? Who are you writing it for? And then what topics will your audience value? So I want you to draft that out. What's it about? Who's it for? And what topics will your audience value? Then I want you to go and subscribe to content your audience might already be familiar with. This is not so that that gets in your head. I'm sorry, I have to close out the click because the GIF is like distracting me. Not so that your competition gets in your head and you're writing for them, but because you want to start thinking about why would this newsletter be better to subscribe to than another? How can I uniquely position this newsletter to get attention in a way that makes it critical for the subscriber? So what I like to tell people is to think about like subscribing to those for a few weeks, analyzing the content, the sections, the way they're delivering information, and to try to figure out what your unfair competitive advantage might be, right? So are you an expert? Do you have access to experts? Are you good at synthesizing information or summarizing it? Like what would make you the top resource for people in the industry you want to serve? So you have to really get your mind in the headspace of the people you are trying to serve and imagine what is a resource that would be valuable to them. And a lot of brands and companies get this wrong because they think about, what do I want them to know about me? When if you turn that around and you say, what could I deliver that would most benefit them? And you change that intention from, I want to make sure they know this, to I want to be of as much service as possible. Then you start doing the thing that we want to do with newsletters, which is to earn trust. And then you find, after you have figured out what your unique, unfair competitive advantage could be, it could be that you offer three things. Like when you think about actors and they say like, oh, he's a triple threat because he can dance, sing, and act or something. You want to kind of make a list of the things that make you unique as a brand or an individual or a writer, and then hone in on those in a way where you are delivering something that uses those talents in a way that attracts and maintains and grows relationships with the people you want to work with. So you have to really kind of be hard on yourself about the goals that you've set and determine if the content you have strategized is actually in alignment with the goal that you set. Because like Margot likes to say, sometimes you end up writing that for your competition, or you end up writing for your CEO. And really who you have to write for is the reader who you want to prompt to be in love with you. All right. It's like a relationship thing. So you find that intersection, and I'm serious, make the lists, because once you start getting this on paper, you start to realize, okay, these are the topics that I can really shine in. And here are the ways people are already seeing them. I don't want you to think about it as like, I have to win this person from this list to my list. I want you to think like, what presentation could I deliver that would be unique so that I'm almost creating a moat around myself so that no one else can deliver it in the same way, right? So it's kind of like category creation in its own sense. So testing topics involves trial and error, and you can do the research that you want to decide on that first batch of topics and then test them out in a few issues. You don't need to feel like you have to have them all perfect on the first try. And changing out topics is really easy in Curated. So I'm about to hop into the software and show you. I bet when I screen share, it does the same thing it did earlier, but we're going to try. We're going to see. Aha, there is desktop 1 and desktop 2. So if I choose desktop 2, do you see marketer hire again?
I think that's, yes. I see Raisin Bread maybe. I think
Yep.
that's Raisin Bread. Okay, great.
Marketer hire. Okay, perfect. All right. So the Newsletter Fest newsletter I'm in right now, which y'all, the open rates and the click rates have been amazing. And the reason for that is because we are very clear with our value prop. We are holding an event. This is the newsletter for the event about newsletters, right? And we are going to be announcing speakers and sessions and giving you opportunities to engage with the event and get prepared for it. There's only been 8 issues, but the open rates and the click rates have been amazing because we were very clear about what we were going to be sending, and then we sent it and people enjoyed it because it was exactly what we told them to sign up for. So this had a few different categories. We had countdown, which is over now. We get to like eliminate that category if we send out anything new. We had, and that's where announcements also went. We had speaker spotlights. So we went to the effort to give you a little bit about each speaker throughout the whole 8-week process of sending that newsletter. And then we continually had the lineup in here, which included any session changes we might have had or new sessions we added during the week. And this section right here was just a list of the dates and times and ways to click through. And we learned along the way from our readers, hey, this is a little bit hard to register through the Notion pages. Could you improve this? So we made a big announcement in one of our issues, like, hey, we have improved this. I'm all about, in your content, especially if you're able to use a more informal tone, taking people on a journey with you makes them feel like they are much more involved in the process than putting a lot of distance and getting super corporate with them. And then we asked people to share. So this is the issue, which was slightly different. I'm going to see if that'll open, where all we were doing was saying like, hey, we know we don't usually send on Monday, but we figured out a way to speed up registration, and we know this is valuable to you. So we got an elephant in pink chucks and threw a GIF in, and then gave people links. Not the same profiles and things that we had going on in other issues. So if you have not used it yet, I'm going to switch over to opt-in weekly because I think it more clearly illustrates this. Once you have gone into issue content categories and created categories, which I had a guest curator a few weeks ago. So I created her own guest curator category to keep that separate from my prologue so that we could just pop her picture in, right? If you're not writing in that category that week, it just doesn't appear, right? And this is the backbone of the product. It allows you to build out the template for your issues and then to name your categories, which you can edit at any time, and you can move in order at any time, right? So if I were to discover that money matters is the most important thing to my audience, I could move it higher up in the newsletter because I want to deliver that more prominently, or I could determine to move it to the bottom and tease it in my prologue and say, hey, by the way, Money Matters delivers this week, and entice them to scroll to the end. So opening a content loop, Russ Henneberry style. So within Curated, you can reorder these, you can rename them, you can create new ones. Seth's brother, Calvin, has a newsletter called Mark as Read. And he and his friend, I forget his name, publish this newsletter. And I think they create new categories like on the fly. So they would not be able to easily do what I'm about to teach you to do. So I say, keep your categories manageable. You might notice that you didn't see signature in my newsletter. And that is because the look and feel of signature is hidden because I just want it to be a little text at the bottom. So I don't have to have it be a lozenge header like the rest of my header categories. So if I did want to change the order, I could, but the important thing that I am looking at is the summary report, which lives right here. And what this summary report does is allows you to look at the past year, the past 6 months, the past 3 months, or the past 30 days, and see how content is performing. Because you might be testing something new and you don't want to look at the last year or last 6 months, because you want to look at performance in relation to everything that just happened in the past 30 days versus the past year. So you want to define what time period you want to look at and then start making some comparisons. So if we're looking at the past year, Curated has maintained Opt-in Weekly has maintained a 36% open rate, which is actually still quite strong, and I'm happy about that. And if you haven't attended a session where we have talked about that, please know 30% open rates are phenomenal. That's considered top of your game in the email newsletter space. So I feel like I could link you to an issue of Opt-in Weekly where I iterate this, but I have a lot of people who are confused and they don't know that. And they think they have low open rates when really they have quite a respectable open rate. So one thing that I worry about, because I want another 60% average open rate, like the MarketingProfs newsletter, is that we are giving people the chance. One major driver of signups to this newsletter is when you sign up for a curated account just to start testing it, you can opt in or not to Opt-in Weekly. And not everyone's converting on that. Not everyone, like that is not in full alignment maybe with the newsletter. So I'm thinking about ways to keep people engaged as they come in through the product. And maybe that is a separate newsletter that is just about Curated, the software, instead of the Opt-in Weekly, make your newsletter better newsletter. So that's something I can consider with my content. But what this gives you is your most popular issues. So if you wanted to just look by issue and see like, hey, what did I do in that issue that achieved that many clicks versus others? You can go through and do that. Now, popularity here, we're going back to high school, right? Popularity here is defined by total clicks. What I want you to keep in mind is if you have a newsletter where you are not really encouraging clicks, or if you have sections where you are not encouraging clicks, like my prologue section, this is not going to give you that visual on how that is performing. So you have to use other metrics like responses to your email where people say, hey, great story, so glad you told me. So you need quantitative and qualitative metrics to look at things. But what this does give you is the open rate of particular issues, the click rate, but everything is determined by the total clicks, if that makes sense. So popularity by issue is determined by total clicks. Popularity by category is determined by total clicks. Something interesting happened here, which is that screen share used to be the most popular category and has now dropped. Maybe people got a little tired of like the 1 hour interviews I was doing, which I have now done less of, and I've been putting in like shorter clips. But essentially, this gives you, this is the thing, the money shot right here to me as a content strategist. This is the equivalent of if you were running a blog that had multiple categories and you were trying to figure out which category is performing best with your audience. So suddenly I can see, hey, that's great because that's the category, newsletter tips, that I think that all of my personas are interested in. It usually delivers information that everyone is interested in. Beyond that, it looks like I'm attracting more marketers than publishers, almost twice as many. I don't love that stat. So I'm trying to figure out what to do about publishing. Maybe the decision I made to just, to just do the links is not working. And the way I could analyze that is I'm looking at the past year right now, but I made that change. Oh, Seth, was it in the past month or past 2 months or so?
I would say past 2 months.
Okay, so in the past month, publishing has dropped off. So this could be telling me that that's not working either, and that I need to do something different to attract publishers. Let me look at past 3 months. And it's still not in there. So it looks like I had more traction with publishers before than I do now. What I think that this could help someone decide, especially if they were using one newsletter to serve multiple personas, would be, hey, do I need to do a spin-off newsletter that is just for publishers? Because publishers and marketers aren't too excited about the same things. And would that mean that I would replicate Opt-in Weekly and call it Opt-in Weekly Publishers? Because if you think about it, if Morning Brew had these kind of stats, which we don't know, I think they had a custom backend going on, that would be what told them, hey, we have enough readers of this marketing section that we need to do Morning Brew marketing, which they launched. And they launched Morning Brew Emerging Tech, and they launched Morning Brew, a podcast, right? Business casual. So looking at some of these things can tell you where you're getting the most traction if you are looking at total clicks of that content, which maybe by taking the publishing section down to just things that could be clicked, I am now showing myself that I did not have the publisher's interests the way I thought I did, right? Or that I need to be writing more specifically for them. So I love that I'm learning a little lesson while I'm talking with y'all. You also are going to get the number of new subscribers during that time period and the total links collected. Links collected, I'm just like an avid link collector. But that doesn't speak as much to me as this new email subscribers data, because I could technically go in and say, okay, during the last 60 days, how many subscribers? And then the last, what were my sequences? The last 3 months or the last 6 months? So we could do, okay, what's interesting is in the last 6 months, there were 826, but in the last 3 months, it was 200, right? What was it? 219. So something happened in the last 3 months that was not achieving the same number of people subscribing as the times before. Maybe I do need to go back to longer interviews. So there are a lot of different ways you can interpret that content, but you use this report to help you test. So you would build in a new content. Let me walk you through the rest of the report just in case you're interested. There's the top 10 overall links over that time period, which can give you an idea of exactly which articles your audience is finding most interesting. So these are the top 10 overall links. See how they're from the newsletter tips category? And then we have the top link per category. So I could go in and say, oh, publishing hasn't been doing that great. But the top link was when I said, here's a course that journalists and publishers can take. So maybe what I'm doing with this wrap up of what's happened in publishing is not what they want. Maybe they want to be taught things. And so maybe that publishing section should change to some new lesson that I bring in per issue for a publishing audience. Obviously,
Okay,
the one that, yeah.
I do have a question from Sean.
Yeah.
I'll just go ahead and read it for him. He asked, what is the window of time for phasing out subscribers who don't open the email with the newsletter again? And he asked, is it 3 to 4 issues or basically a month for a weekly newsletter? Do you have any advice for that?
I don't think, unless you are selling sponsorships and you're trying to prove that you have a super high open rate, I don't think that phasing them out in as short a window as like they didn't open 4 issues, they should be gone. is the wisest thing to do. If you're working for a client who wants to be seeing a high open rate, you may consider that, but I don't think it's necessary. When I talked to Caitlin about this, she said that there are some instances where the open rate can be deceptively under what it actually is. And so I try not to think that way because I think I could over amplify in my head what that open rate might be, but that the click rate is a better like tell of if someone actually opened something. So there could be people who are opening it who are not showing up in your open rate. But if they have clicked, there is record and curated of that. So she and I have been talking because at one point in time, I had an influx of signups for a particular promotion that we were running that I knew weren't opening it. And I said, hey, anybody who hasn't opened it in the last 5 to like, I think it might have been like 7 or 8 issues, because I like to make that a long span, like give them a long amount of time. We got rid of them, right? And I think this is a good question for the session with Brian Minnick, because he will have some insights about that. But with cleaning the list and requesting that of curated, she and I have been talking about using like a combination of a rule that says people who haven't opened in the last 2 months or clicked, to see if that would, because what I would hate to do, right, is to get somebody off the list who actually was opening and they just don't click, but they like, why did I get unsubscribed from this? And sometimes that has to do with like, if they work at a company that has a certain shield or something going on that's keeping us from being able to track that. And I'm going to go ahead and say and be transparent that I don't speak that language well enough to feel like I've articulated it like the way I should. So if you have further technical questions about that, I would highly encourage going through Seth, who is going to be like, hey, Caitlin, let's put this in the right words. But all of that said, I do think there is value in getting people off your list who are not engaged. But I think it's more of a like twice a year kind of thing than a like, oh, it's been a month and they're not jumping for joy at what they signed up for. Let's get rid of them. So that's going to be my policy right now, is to kind of revisit that twice a year, because I feel like, A, I shouldn't be too frustrated with 31% average open rate over 6 months or a year. And then B, that I would love to build in the option to send an email to the segment of people who haven't opened that says, and not in a scary big brother way, like, but says like, hey, are you still interested in receiving this? And allow them to opt in. Because what you can do is go subscriber by subscriber in the system and have them reconfirm. Is that the right language, Seth?
Yep.
So if you go and look at your if you go and look at your subscribers, if you have some people, say if you are in if you're in an industry where you're like, this is an important, like you're doing ABM marketing or something, and you know, like you want this person engaging with your content, but you think they're not because it looks like they haven't opened. And I don't know like what the margin of error is on that. So I could be like over exaggerating this blind spot, right? But what I would do is then be closely following that person. If you know, like this is an enterprise account that we could win, and then be sending a personal email that says, hey, I just wanted to see if you're getting value out of this, like phrase it in that way, if you have the ability to have that kind of relationship with them, or to use the confirmation sequence and make sure that the way the messages are worded for that align with your brand and what they are being asked. Does that address?
Yeah, I think
That
so. And
question?
yeah, you can set up that reconfirmation message inside Curated, just the same way that you would edit a subscription message for whenever someone new subscribes. Caitlin did drop a little clarification about the open tracking, and I'll just go
Mhm.
ahead and read it out for future
Yeah,
recordings.
I love
Um,
it.
so she said open tracking is not totally reliable. This is because open tracking is handled by embedding a pixel image in the email, and a lot of email clients will disable images by default or by preference. Click tracking, however, is reliable because when a link is clicked, it will always hit our servers.
Same.
So thanks, Caitlin, for that. And then last
And
thing
she has
is,
explained that to me before, but I didn't remember.
yeah. That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she says that your explanation was still great and accurate, though, with a smiley face. And then last thing is Brian Minnick's session that Ashley mentioned is on Thursday at 12:30 Eastern. So make sure to check that out.
Yeah. So this is basically the curated way. I have worked in a lot of email systems. I think this is a unique competitive advantage that we have. It's almost an unfair competitive advantage because the kind of data you get running a blog that shows you page views on certain blogs and CTA clicks on those blogs, I have not seen that in other email systems. So that if it becomes available elsewhere, great. But for right now, I think as a content strategist, that this is a superior way instead of doing what most clients are going to give you, which is issue stats that kind of tell you which links got which clicks. I feel like the synthesis of that information and aggregating it and giving you a report like the summary report actually gives me a lot more intelligence about decisions I want to make. And you saw me like being provoked by what's going on in publishing in my newsletter right now and how I can appeal more to that audience. So any other questions about how to use this to make decisions, to test content topics, and then determine if you want to keep them or to move to something else?
No questions have popped up in that time that we went over that last one. But it was a fantastic presentation, I thought. So
I'm
if
like winging
anyone,
it. I'm
yeah.
totally winging it. All right, I'm going to stop the screen share, but if you ask a question that needs one, I'm happy to do that.
Sure.
I'm going to like let people get awkward for a second, think through their questions. Thank you, Caitlin, for the smiley face of the like me attempting. I'm also surprised by the fact that more people are here than when I started my screen share.
One
I
note
thought
about,
I had like 4. I was like, I'm talking to 4 people.
Yeah, no, it's been growing. One note that I thought of when you were showing off the click was they have that one section that's almost the trivia section that you showed off. That's the or category.
Yeah.
A lot of time I find myself opening the email just to look at that just for a quick second, but then I'll find myself reading their other stuff, opening different articles there. So that's one thing, like Ashley was saying, to have your subscribers look forward to that section and have it be towards the bottom. So people have to go through and then they'll end up reading other stuff like I do.
So what's interesting with newsletter content strategy is not only finding that unfair advantage that you have, but figuring out how to create segments or sections or categories that might deliver information in slightly different ways. And the way that I'm not even going to pretend like this is my explanation of it. The way that Russ explains this is to think about sports news. I never watch sports news, but I used to be forced to in my parents' house. So I remember how this would go. And his explanation is that ESPN is reporting the same news all day long, right? like this one thing happened, or like these 3 things happened, but they have different segments. And so it might be like a short, like stat of the day kind of segment that they pull in that information and they deliver it in that box. And then later they might be giving that news in more of a long form Q&A interview. So you want to start thinking about the ways you could deliver content and test. You can even still use our category testing summary report to test different ways of delivering that content. Like obviously something's a little whack with the way I'm doing publishing right now that I'm forced to like realize I should probably change, because I was trying a new category. Nobody fought me on it. I did ask them, do you like this? What's going on? And I got like, nobody said it's bad. So I was like, well, I'll give it a shot. But that's part of the beauty of a newsletter, is that you kind of have the luxury of your audience gives you feedback by their behavior and by what they do. They don't expect you to stay static and the same always. Like it's okay to use it to test something, to try something new. I had a little thought in there that I've lost. But I think that is oh, I know, I can relate it. Okay, so that's the sports metaphor for it, like the sports news. The way I think about it, as I come from the magazine publishing industry, right? That was like my internships were all for magazines. My first jobs were at magazines. And when you open a magazine, you expect a front of the book digest section that has little paragraphs of copy and a picture and a header, right? Like you expect what we call front of book. And then you get to something that is stories that have beautiful pictures and take up the entire page, and there are no advertisements opposite these, and they go on, and these are called features. And what you are in is in the middle of the book in the feature well. And then you get to the back of the book, and the back of the book all of a sudden has different short sections. So they like always appear in each issue, and there's usually something special on the back page, right? Like the backstory or the like profile of the local business owner Q&A, or a narrative piece by a local writer or something like so. Or I feel like some magazines used to do like quotes from kids, like 15 little blurby quotes from like silly things kids said that month. So what you want to think about with your content is what special thing can I deliver it? And then what little boxes can I put it in to deliver it in different ways? And then what am I looking at in my software to tell me if that's performing well or not? Does that resonate? I can speak much better about magazines than I can about sports.
Yeah,
It's
that
just
sounded,
a flaw of mine. All right. Any other questions? We are at 6:00, but I don't mind staying on. I'm sure my husband minds because he's watching the kids. But
Yeah,
won't
no other
tell
questions
him.
came in. I think a few people maybe got some times confused. We've had a few people come in kind of towards the end of the hour. So just small reminder that it is Eastern time whenever Ashley is mentioning times and prior sessions earlier in the day. So make sure to convert that to whatever your local time is.
Happy to have you join late. Sorry about that if that happened to anyone. This was recorded, so you can hop right over to YouTube to watch the beginning if you are enchanted by this conversation. In the beginning, I showed off a few different newsletters and talked through their content strategies, as well as kind of explained the importance of writing for your particular audience in your particular way and trying to identify a unique, or what did I say, an unfair competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Here is a strategy that I'm going to give people that I discovered today. And this is a marketing thing. This is not a newsletter thing, but it is kind of interesting, and I'm just going to share it. I have an away message right now for people who might stumble upon emailing me and having trouble with Newsletter Fest. And the title of that away message in my email is, I might be at Newsletter Fest. And then within it, I have an explanation of the fact that I'm busy this week with Newsletter Fest, and there's a Slack community and a YouTube channel if they're having trouble getting into a session. What I didn't think about when I created this, because I just wanted something that was like a stopgap for someone emailing me saying like, whoa, I can't get into your session, was that by putting that as a first priority, I have somehow, because I am subscribed to like 100 newsletters, gotten the attention of some of those newsletter creators as their newsletter has been delivered this week. So that is my surprising marketing tactic that I didn't even realize existed. And I'm glad it came out of like just an authentic desire to help people who might be having an emergency. But I will say now that I have a little healthy conversation going on LinkedIn about away messages and use cases for those, because that is something that I never thought of as a marketing tactic. That actually, if you had a email address dedicated to a particular subscription, to subscribing to a particular persona that sends something out, that then when you are speaking at an event or doing a thing, you can set the away message to kind of be like, I'm at this thing. And then they're like, what is that thing? So anyway, that's my little like, didn't expect to deliver it tidbit of the day, because I like sharing things I know because I'm a curator. All right. We shall end. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.